Hello and welcome to our second Money Skills for Life class. This is the second of a 12-part webinar. We'll be discussing various personal finance topics. If you have some questions, go ahead and throw those into the comments. Hopefully we'll have enough time at the end that we'll be able to cover all of those. And if we have plenty of time, we may just throw on the mics and let everyone ask their own questions. As I mentioned last time, my name is Michelle. I am the president of a financial planning firm. I'm also a CHFP or CHFC, FPQP, CRPC, a bunch of different letters. All that really means is that I think that finance or personal finance issues are absolutely fascinating. They're infinite. You'll be using these at all kinds of different branches throughout your life. And by having a really good foundation of what these financial topics mean, then it'll help you make better decisions throughout your life. Now, last time we looked at decision making. We looked at the PACED, it was called the acronym PACED, P-A-C-E-D, decision-making method. And what this showed was that we can identify a problem and then look for alternatives, set some criteria, and then once we have those alternatives and criteria in place, we can then evaluate some of those issues and maybe make some trade-offs, look at some opportunity costs, and then eventually make a really well-rounded decision. Now, I don't like to give out homework for this type of stuff, but I did ask that you take or compare 2 or more products and come up with some criteria and see what trade-offs and what opportunity cost you were willing to accept with those. And I know that the last couple of weeks have been a little wonky with the weather, and so you may not have been able to do that. So we're just going to take a look at some right now. Now, I went on to the Lowe's, just Lowe's.com, and I pulled up portable generators. I figured that would be a pretty appropriate item to look at considering the weather that we've had. And so just pulling up portable generators, I came up with about 258 results. And that was a lot because if we're looking at really digging down in to compare some of the pros and cons of each one, that's going to take us a long time to really sort through that number of them. So Lowe's and most websites have a search feature that allows you to filter results down to a more manageable number. So I narrowed that down a bit and I put in dual fuel. And so that provided me with 62 results. And here's just a couple of them right here. And so if I were looking at just these 4, obviously, I would probably pick this cheaper one over this more expensive one, but I don't know if that one's going to work because I really just know that it has dual fuel. I don't know what the wattage is, the power, I don't know the run time. I really don't know a lot of information. So the first thing I want to really do is build some criteria. What is important to me? What do I need it to do? And so as I started to look at some of these issues, we just kind of made a set of criteria over here on the left that I would like to see. And anytime you're building a criteria for a product or products that you're looking to compare, it's a good idea to prioritize those criteria. So for instance, to make sure that it is something that's going to work for my house, then I know that I'm going to need about 8,000 watts. I think the calculation I did was about 6,500, but you have run time and start time. So about 6,500 was my minimum that I would want. So I went ahead and bumped that to 8,000. And I would like for it to have a pretty decent runtime. I certainly don't want to have to shuffle through, 12 to 17 inches of snow to refill it every hour. So I want to make sure that it runs for a pretty decent amount of time. We put on here a $1,200 a roundabout price because one, I really didn't know what they cost. And I certainly didn't know what it would cost to have all of these different things that I would like to have. So I just put about 1,200. I also wanted it to have some pretty good reviews. And so we put a five-star review minimum on it. And that usually will pick up 4.5 to 5 stars. And so that way we can make sure that the product that we're getting is pretty highly rated. And then we wanted at least 4 outlets because we could plug in 4 different items. Now we know that we could also, build a transfer box, or we could, use some extension cords. But 4 outlets seems like a pretty average number of outlets for a generator. So the next thing we did was we just started going down these and looking to see, okay, is this meeting what I'm wanting? And for this first one, 8,000 watts, each of these have 8,000 watts. This one's 10, 5, 95, 12, 5, and 9,000. So they all meet this 8,000 watt minimum. We also wanted a long run time, and we can see here that the run time is 8.5 hours, 12, 11, and 7. So depending on what you would prefer, obviously the longer run time, but let's see if there's any trade-offs that we need to make to get that. The price we were looking at would be about $1,200. And these three do have that. This one's the only one it's actually over double. And so it does have much higher wattage. It has many more plugs than we were needing, or outlets that we were needing. But are we willing to, are we wanting to do a trade-off and spend that much more money when this isn't really something that we need? And I'm going to go with no on that. And so we're just going to kind of mark this one out, and we'll see how the others fare. Now, the next thing we wanted was 5 stars, and all of these have either 4.5 to 5 stars. Now, one thing I would want to point out is we can see that this one here has 5 stars, but there's only 5 reviews on it, where this one has almost 3,500 reviews. So there's a much better representation. So it doesn't really make a difference at this point, but that could be something we want to keep in our mind, because if it comes down to all things being equal, then that may be a deciding factor. And the outlets, they all had at least 4 outlets, so we're good with that. So we're really down to 3 now, these 3 here. And so all we do is we go back through those criteria and rank those again, because we need to get it down to just 1. And so the 8,000 watts of 8,000 watts, we can see 10, 5, 95, and 9. Now, one thing that I can consider is, I don't really need this 10,500, and it is a little bit over what I was wanting to spend, and it's considerably 300 over, this one here that has what I need. So do I want to give up the opportunity of leaving money in the bank versus spending extra money on something I really don't need? I'm going to go ahead and mark this one out too. And it may be a great deal and it may be a great generator, but it's a little bit more than what I'm looking for. And I really don't want to spend the extra money if I don't have to. So now we're down to these 2. And we really just go back through this process again. 8,000 watts, but these are so close, so it's not really a big difference. The runtime, well, look here. Here's something to consider. There's 12 hours here and only 7 hours. So definitely this is going to make a big difference for us, because that's an extra 5 hours. I could take a nap for that. And so this is potentially going to be the selling point here. Also, we get those additional 5 hours of runtime. We get an extra plug, and it's going to be cheaper. So I definitely think that if we need to pick one, this would probably be the best one for us. Now, if we decide to, and to top it off, it has a lot more reviews. So if we went into the store and this was not available, this would definitely be our second pick. But if it was available and we could get it, and it's going to serve our purpose, then absolutely. So this is what we look at when we say we have different trade-offs, we have opportunity costs that we're giving up, and it helps us narrow down what we're spending. And it makes us, I guess, have a really better idea and informed decision on those expenses. And that's what's so important when we begin to create a budget. And the reason it's important is because we're not going to have infinite amounts of money. We have a finite amount of money, and so we really want to make sure that we're spending that money in the most optimal and effective way possible. But before we can really start figuring out what expenses we can afford, we kind of need to figure out what we have to spend. And so we're going to look at income, and we're going to look at gross versus net income, because these are two different things. Gross income is the total amount that you make, but there's a lot of deductions that come out. And after those deductions, we have what is called your take-home pay, and that's going to be your net income. And some of those deductions I mentioned are taxes. So we're going to take a look at some different taxes. For instance, the federal, state, and your payroll taxes. And then once all of those deductions are taken out, then we can start figuring out your expenses and also some goals, because it's always a great idea to set some goals for any extra money that you have, especially an emergency fund. And it's important that we look at all of these different things, because I know this is kind of a depressing point to make, but once you spend a certain dollar, you will never get a second chance to spend that same dollar again. I mean, you can make another dollar, you can spend it on some different stuff, but you never have a second chance to spend that $1. So we want to make sure that we're doing a really good job, and we are making good decisions on how we're spending that. So we're going to take a look at a pay stub here. Now, this particular pay stub it shows that this individual is working 40 hours per week, and they're making $18 an hour. And we can see that if we multiply this 18 times 40, we're going to get this $720. So Brandon, whose paycheck this is, whenever he gets his paycheck at their pay deposited at the end of that week, do you think he's going to get this $720? Absolutely not. In fact, he's going to get this amount, $531.86, because of these deductions. The taxes due, gross versus net, and that's where this comes into play. So these deductions here are from up here. And so when we look at all of these deductions, we can see here that there's FICA Med, FICA SS, and Fed. So these two look pretty important because they both have the word FICA. So this must be a pretty big tax if we're getting hit by it twice. So what is FICA? FICA is a U.S. payroll tax, and it stands for Federal Insurance Contributions Act, and it's deducted from every single paycheck. Now, this is done, if we add these deductions up, we're looking at the total of being 7.65%, and we'll look at the breakdown in just a moment, but it's going to be 7.65% no matter what. So it's straight across the board. Now, federal, it can be a little bit different, because we can elect to have more taken out. We can elect to have maybe a little less taken out. And so we're going to have some options with this. It's still going to be based on our income, but we'll look at how that works in just a moment. Now, there are some mandatory deductions. Like I just mentioned, there's the Social Security, Medicare, and federal. So what exactly are these? Well, the Social Security is a term used for the Old Age Survivors and Disability Insurance Program. And it's in the US, and the reason it gets the term Social Security is because it's run by the Social Security Administration. Now, money goes in to the Social Security system, and it branches out into two separate trust funds. One is the OASI, and I am terrible at writing here. And then there's one that's the DI, and that is really big. So the OASI is for the Old Age Survivors Insurance. And what that covers is it's really for retirees that have reached their full retirement age. Now, you can draw it a little bit before, not before the age of 62, but let's say, for instance, mine and probably yours, full retirement age will be 67. So if I take it at 67, I get my full benefits. If I take it before that, I get a reduction in it. And if I wait to take it, I get a little bit more each year. Now, the DI portion of this goes to the Disability Insurance Trust Fund for disability beneficiaries. So those that have some form of disability that are eligible under the Social Security rule. Now, the combined amount that goes into here of that 7.65% that comes out of your check for this Social Security, and I'm terrible writing this, is 6.2%. Now, this other one down here, Medicare, is going to be the other 1.45%. I should get a pen for this, guys. Let's just delete that. Is 1.45%. Now, Medicare is the federal health insurance program for Americans 65 and older, and some people with disabilities. And it's supported through payroll withholding, but the money goes to this third trust fund. So we had the trust fund here for OASI, and then we had the DI trust fund. This is a third trust fund, and it's only for the Medicare part. Now, the federal income tax isn't just a flat 1.45 or 6.2. It actually is going to vary depending on what your income level is and any deductions that you may be eligible for. And we're going to look at that in just a moment when we talk about the Form 1040 for income tax filing. Now, you may also be subject to state and local taxes. We don't have that in Texas, and nor do we have that in Wichita County, so we're pretty lucky with that, but some places do have that deduction as well, and these are all mandatory deductions. You may also have another mandatory deduction, which would be a court order. If you have a court order that says that there are certain garnishments from your pay, that the employer must withhold certain things, you may be subject to that. And that is a mandatory deduction, as well as child support payments. Many child support payments are done by court order. And so those would be a deduction that you would not have the ability to stop. We also have some voluntary deductions, for instance, retirement plans. If your employer has a retirement plan, an employer sponsored plan, similar to like a 401k, 403b, or 457, you are able to make contributions directly from your payroll, and you can do that tax free. You also have life insurance. If your employer offers a life insurance package to you, you may have to pay a certain amount on that, as well as disability insurance. Now, this disability insurance is a bit different than the Social Security disability insurance. This disability insurance is a voluntary insurance, and it includes short and long-term disability. And it's a little bit more lenient on the eligibility requirements versus the Social Security disability. That one has much more stringent requirements for eligibility, and it's more for long-term or permanent disabilities. Whereas the short-term disability, I could break my arm and just not be able to work, and so I could claim on this. And I would not be able to do that or qualify under the Social Security disability for something like that. I may also have healthcare premiums taken out of my payroll. And I also, if I have a high deductible insurance policy, I may qualify or be able to open an HSA account. And this is what we call a health savings account. And it's only eligible for those, or only available to those that have a high deductible premium for their health insurance. Now, this FSA is what we call a flexible spending account, and they're not near as common as they used to be. HSA is kind of like the new kid in town, and so that is going to be much more prevalent, and it has a lot of benefits that the FSA does not. So those are all things that may come out of our check that we may have the ability to, some we have the ability to do and make certain arrangements for, and some of them we don't. And so once all of these items come out of your account or out of your pay, that's where we end up getting that net income. Now, that doesn't mean that we're fully done with paying taxes, though. Every April 15th, we have the tax filing deadline. And the reason I mentioned like we don't have an exact percentage that comes out of our pay, and that it's like an exact tax bracket or tax rate is because our system is a progressive tax system. So it means the more you make, the more you owe. And so each April 15th, we have to file a tax return to show how much money we've made, how much we paid in taxes, and we then determine if we overpaid in taxes or if we underpaid in taxes. If we overpaid, we will get a refund. And if we underpaid, we will have to owe. And the reason that we can't just set a flat amount for this is I'm just going to throw out some numbers here, and it's definitely not part of the system, but it's just to give you an idea, or they're not exact figures, but they are to give you an idea of how this works. So let's say for the first $20,000 you make, you only pay 10% tax. And then the next $20,000, you paid 12% tax. And then the next 20,000, you pay 22%. So if someone earns, let's say $55,000, they would be in the 22% range because they've already done, up through 20 or 20. And so they would be in that third tier, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be paying 22% on all of that money, because the first 20,000 is taxed at 10%, the next 20 is at 12, and then only that last 15,000 they made is going to be on that 22 range. So since this is all kind of weird and wonky, and sometimes we can't predict how much we're going to make, that's why we can't get that number exactly right. And we have to file this Form 1040 each year to show that. So we may overpay, we may underpay, and this is where we kind of settle up each year. Now, once we have all of these deductions taken out and we set aside any money that, we may owe in taxes, then we can determine how much we can spend on everything else. And that's how the way we do that is by creating a budget. And a budget is simply just a cash flow plan of how much you spend. Now, remember back with this paycheck or the pay stub we looked at, and Brandon was making $531.86 bring home each week. That would equate to $2127.44. Now, I didn't get all the days exact or the number of hours per month exact, but we just said 531.86 times 4. And so that's how we came up with this. But before we can start plugging and chugging the numbers into here, another thing that we want to look at with our expenses is we want to divide them into two separate categories. So we have discretionary, which is all those wants that we have, and we have non-discretionary, which are our needs. Now, something like mortgage, groceries, food, maybe our car, those are going to be things that we need. So those are going to be non-discretionary. But all the things like gas, miscellaneous, even a cell phone, any type of entertainment, going to the movies, ordering pizza, all of those things are going to be things that we want. Even if we're looking at streaming devices, Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, or how we like to call it, the Baby Yoda show. So all of these things we want to first make sure that our needs are met, and then anything that's left over we can use for our wants. And hopefully we have some money left over at the end of that. Now in the essence of time, I went ahead and plugged some numbers in here. So for instance, we're going to say that we have to pay $750 a month for rent. We're going to say that we're renting a place, and so we don't have to pay home insurance on this. So we're paying rent in an apartment. Our utilities about $150. We do have a car to get back and forth to work, and our car payments $350, our car insurance $75, cell phone, internet, groceries. And what I did was I just did the national average for this area for groceries for a one-person household. And then we have gas for the vehicle. And we went ahead and threw in $100 for miscellaneous. And this kind of just does a pizza night a week, $25 pizza each week. And so that kind of gives us some fun money. And if we have this, and this is our expenses, we know we're doing okay. We're still in the black. And so we still have $92.44 left over each month. Now, if I decided, if I said I would like to save $100 per month, am I able to do that? Well, I only have $92.44 left over. But if you've ever gone grocery shopping And if you come out to $350.00 every single month, you are fantastically amazing. I would never be able to do that because the price of stuff, even if you bought the exact same stuff, prices fluctuate. So it's going to be very uncommon for you to hit this dollar each individual week. And so you may have a few extra dollars left over there. You may have your utilities, maybe in the summer they're a little bit higher, in the winter a little bit, a little bit lower than that. And in the spring and fall, it may be much lower. So you may be able to do that because, we're so close. Now, if I said I want to save $200 every month, well, that's where I'm going to be looking at some trade-offs to come up with that additional money. I may have to drive less. Maybe I can, instead of paying for internet, if I'm in an apartment, maybe I can talk with the neighbor and see if I can't jack some of theirs. And maybe I have to give up pizza night for a bit. And so these are things that we have to look at. And this is where we go back and we look at those trade offs and what opportunity costs that we're giving up to do that. What trade offs am I willing to make if I want to do something more than what is available to me? And so that's why it's important. That's why we wanted to cover that up front and make sure that you understand why you're doing this because it's such a big deal when we start plugging things into the budget. Now, for that extra $92 we had, we may decide to save it up for something special. And we can do that by establishing a SMART goal. And SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant. And relevant can also mean just realistic and also time based. Now, one thing that we always encourage people to plan for is an emergency fund because, as we saw even just last week, things can happen. Things out of our control can happen. And so we need some money. Some people call it a rainy day fund. You can call it a snowy day fund if you want, but put back some money to make sure that if you do have to get a new tire or if you're driving a vehicle that you have, some money set back in case you need a vehicle repair. And then once you have enough set away for that, then you can start saving for something else, like a new TV, a video console, a new computer, maybe a vacation or summer camp. And just make sure that when you do set a goal, you make sure that it meets this SMART process. Because I can't necessarily say, I want to save up money for a TV. TV is going to cost $500. And if I only have $92.44 a month, I'm not going to be able to have enough money to do that in 2 months. Now, I might have enough in 5 months or 6 months or a year. That would be absolutely fine, but I certainly wouldn't have it in a shorter period of time. So we do want to make sure that it is attainable, it is realistic, and you have a time limit on it. It doesn't mean that you have to, like if I say I'm going to do it in 5 months and it takes me 6 months, I've extended that time a little bit, but we want to have some kind of at least a temporary or a modest deadline on it. We don't want to just say, well, we want to save up $500 and there's no end date, because if there's no end date, we can't figure out how measurable that is. We have to see some measure of success. And the only way we can do that is to say, this is where we should be at this specific time. So make sure that it's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. And this is really all budgeting is. It's saying we're going to try to do the best we can with our money. We're going to try not to overspend on things. And to be able to do that, if we make decisions and, using that paced flow method, then it's really going to help us. Now, next class is on March 12th, and we're going to be talking about bank services and credit. And there's all kinds of bank services that are available to you, but only some of them if you have decent credit. So we're going to look at why credit is so important and why it's important for us to keep up with good credit. It's not just that we can't get a loan if we have bad credit. We may not even be able to open a checking account. So we're going to be looking at all of these types of things. So hope to see you back. Until next time, take care.